Or the glamour of LA. It may not have the history or the intrigue of Bombay. But when it comes to making music, you should up making news for people who just don't make sense and people making do. Seems a mass of contradictions, pulling different ways. Oh yeah. Between from them come and go, and the ones who got to stay. Oh yeah. It's the mass of blues, man. It's the blues. It's the nation's capital. It's Washington, D.C. It's the nation's capital. It's the nation's capital. It's the nation's capital. Washington, D.C. So I wanted to contribute myself. I was writing down and putting all the categories together. I ain't got no money. I ain't got no job blues. I ain't got no woman blues. Then I said, wait a minute. See, I don't want to waste no categories. I ain't got no money blues. I ain't got no job blues. I ain't got no woman blues. Hell, them the same thing. Because if I could get me a job, I could make me some money. I could call me a lady. Yeah, baby. I'd be doing a whole bunch better. So I put them all in the same category. But I wrote other pieces of blues information. Because what had happened was that I had found out later on, unfortunately, in my education about people like Langston Hughes, about people like Sterling Brown, about people like County Cullen and Gene Toomer and Claude McKay. And these people had taken the blues as a poetry form back in the 20s and the teens during the Harlem Renaissance, and they had fine-tuned the blues. They had sanded it down so that it became a remarkable sort of an art form. But what happened is that in many instances, we didn't learn about that. We learned about the kind of poetry that nobody could understand. Like on 17th Street, 9th Avenue, when I was a teenager, man, we didn't want to hear nothing about poetry. Somebody say something about poetry, we say, oh yeah, where's he at? Name on over here. Because we was into shooting the jumper. And that was damn near all. So in the 9th grade, like a teacher sneaked up on us and put these pieces of paper on the table, told everybody to read them, and then tell her what we thought about it. So I said, well, it's all right. Shit, I'll try it. I looked at the poem. The poem said, what now outside the wall I see? A shadow of an image me. I said, well, God damn, let me read this again. What now outside the walls? In the back of the room, somebody said, hey, this must be deep. Because, like, this must be deep is like a drink that we throw over everything, like what we must be, this must be deep means that, like, I recognize all of these words individually. But damn if I can get anything out of the order in which they currently appear. This must be deep. This must be deep. I mean, because you figure must be deep is in this book. You say, well, why the hell would they put it in this book if it didn't mean nothing? Yeah, it's a textbook. Because ordinarily you read that don't mean nothing. You say, hey, this must be nonsense. But you don't want to say that with the teacher standing right next to you. Why you give me this, So you say, hey, this must be deep. And what happens is that when a lot of folks get ready to write poetry, that's what they decide they're going to be, deep. They decide they're going to be poetic. So they come up to me, people come up to me sometimes and say, hey, read my poem. I read it. What now outside the world I see? And the only thing I can say to them is, hey, this must be deep. Because like being influenced by. And when people read my novels, they go, wow, man, this must be deep. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland. Here you are with your Sensei Al Bob, and it must be deep. We're fastly approaching February, and that's why I'm wearing my Valentine's sunglasses and my leprechaun scarf. And who do we got here? Let's see. Oh, there's Jamie. Let's see what gives brother. What's on first base? Gil Scott Heron. That's who was that. And Gil was one of the greats that, he truly was. 70s, 80s, 90s, early O's. And he represented and he documented and he did his best to really give everyone, not just the folk in the Black community, but everyone, a taste of what was
and what was going to be and what needed to be done. And if that didn't happen, what was going to happen. And Gil, he was like up on the cross, because he was like sharpest attack, most entertaining, greatest fun to be. I mean, he was truly a party animal, just walking down the street. But that got a little, and and that's what happens. And he's got a whole bunch of songs about living on the bottle, talking about being a junkie, nodding out, all the above. And it was really sad to, you know, be at a club and know this guy when I was younger, and when he was at his zenith and really tight, and he had a band. Boy, did he have a band! There's a great where this thing comes from. It's called Black Vinyl. It's a documentary film. Go watch that and see what there's. If you go on YouTube, there's a ton of his you know videos that he made with his songs that he made, and you take them and you take a look at him and see when he was really young and sharp and just woo, and then once he started to junk out, woo, and then became an old man. I mean, I followed in that footsteps. I didn't do junk. I just had the excessive hedonist life in moderation. I mean, it killed me kind of, but didn't kill me all the way. So anyway, Gil is a great person and a great artist, and he is the echo of the Harlem um, Renaissance, right? And his family came from that, and he was related to it in a big way. And Harlem Renaissance was basically because it spread all over the country. The Green Book. This book that if you were a black person and driving along, the Green Book would tell you what towns were sundown towns and where you could buy gasoline without getting hassled, or go to a restaurant without getting hassled, or motel without getting hassled. That was the Green Book, and but that didn't guarantee you wouldn't get lynched. So because and it wasn't just being in the South where you got lynched. It everywhere in America you kind of got lynched because as my other new good friend. Oops, let's see. Take these off and put my reading glasses on. Do. I like those ones though. They truly. So that's Gil. That's what Gil looks like. That's what Gil looks like when he was young and really tight, right?
By the kind of poetry that we were all introduced to, people feel as though like the way to be poetic is to make sure that there's certain little parts of it can't nobody understand. Why would you need a poet to make things more complex? Two winos can make things more complex. One of them say to the other one, well, is it best? And the other one look at him right serious and say, yeah. And they communicated. You see, if communication is what it's all about. As far as most people sitting around watching, it could have been two poets talking to one another. They didn't have a clue. So the idea became not only to use ideas that were familiar to people in the community, but to use the language that everybody could understand. Of course, this poetry was always put down as street poetry because, of course, that's where the people were. People were on the street, and these are the people that you wanted to communicate with. Did an idea one time about how often it is that folks brother and sister one another, and how rare it is that something actually comes out of that people can grasp onto.
And see, that's why white people don't do this. They don't have that kind of communication. That's why they start wars and steal things and are really crappy dancers, you know. But you don't have to be black to be black, you know. I'm an African American that's melanin challenged, you know. Today I went to the doctors, and every 3 months they make me. Do I have it with me now? But I'm going to read it to you. I had to fill out this form. You know, are you depressed? Are you often depressed? You know, can you sleep? You know, do you masturbate a lot? You know, it was like I'm going to bring it next time. Next show, I'm going to read it to you because it was, and I made the lady who is like the HR lady. She goes, "Well, you have to fill out the form." She it's like 20 pages long, and she put it in a clipboard. And I said, "Well, you know, I know that under federal law that you have to help me because I can't read." "What do you mean you can't read?" I said, "I can't read." And she's like, "Okay, come here." And so she takes me into like a little cubbyhole thing that HR people have, where they have their desk and you sit at this little chair, right? And she went through all the questions and, do you masturbate? How long do you masturbate? You know, how much jizz do you give? You know, it's like, because I knew that was, this is like the 15th time that I've had to, right? So I just get hilarious, you know, do you drink? No. I said, well, you know, if I go to a wedding and someone gets toasted, I'll have a, well, that means you drink. I said, how much do you drink? I said, you know, maybe, a milliliter a year. She goes, no, you don't drink. So that next, I'm going to bring that up. Let's see. Do 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 do. You're becoming a people who can't do anything. Oh yeah, African liberation. Here we go. This guy, it's his thing is Middle Nation. That's his YouTube channel. Go look it up. Middle Nation.
This is a thumb-sized flashlight made in Germany, which can illuminate up to 1000 m at night. It can easily light up an entire factory.
I mean, right now, the 1950 and so on. And it's truly astonishing how many drastic paradigm shifts took place. Empires fell, empires rose. You know, there was a book, George Friedman, the geopolitical analyst. He wrote a book in the early 2000s called The Next 100 Years, where he tried to sort of forecast what the world might look like in the year 2100. He began by talking about what the world looked like in the year 1900. And then he goes sort of decade by decade, how radically everything changed between, say, 1900 and 1930, or 1930 to 1950, and so on. And it's truly astonishing how many drastic paradigm shifts took place. Empires fell, empires rose, world wars, on and on. Really breathtaking global shifts. When you look at history that way, it's hard to wrap your head around how many changes can actually take place in a relatively short amount of time. Basically, within one person's lifetime, everything can change. You know, in 1900, like he says in his book, London was the center of the world. There was no communism, no Soviet Union. There was the Ottoman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and so on. The Americans mostly stayed on their side of the Atlantic. And it seemed like this is how things would just be, you know, indefinitely. But just a short 40 years or so later, everything changed. England was demolished in the World War. The Ottomans were gone. The Soviets emerged. Germany took over France, on and on. Really radical, unthinkable changes. Then if you go ahead a few more decades to the 1980s, again, it seems like a completely different world. And then on forward to the 2000s, it's remarkable. Everything changed. And when you think about that, when you think about how many huge paradigmatic pendulum swings there have been, that have taken place and that do take place in just a matter of decades, it makes certain continuities even more astonishing. When you're able to maintain a constant amidst the radical changes that sweep over every other element of international relations, global power relationships, international relations, and so on, when you're able to actually keep something unchanged
it lets you know just how important, how paramount it is that this particular status quo remains intact, how important it is to those who are keeping it intact. And I'm talking now about the West's relationship with Africa, because the West's economic relationship with Africa has not fundamentally changed in over 800 years. This is absolutely stunning. If the drastic and rapid changes that can occur and have occurred within the West over just 1 or 2 decades, if that's breathtaking, well, what about the fact that nothing has changed between the West and Africa in basically a millennium? I mean, the relationship was ruthlessly extractive 800 years ago.
And that's what's going on today, this minute, in Darfur, right? They're having these little rebel wars. And the rebel wars are being paid for by corporations. Every country that has resources are having revolutions. And, Sudan is a great example. They had this authoritarian guy for at least 20 years, killed everybody, and had an army and had National Guard that kept everyone in line. And then the people said, we're not taking this anymore. And they kind of said, screw, we're not going to work. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to lay down here and screw you. And so that guy left, and the army said, okay, we'll have a little government here, whoever you want. And then we'll have elections, and we'll, the army and the National Guard, we will keep order. And so, for about 6 months, a year, they were moving towards that. And then the general that ran the army and his best friend, who was the general that ran the National Guard, had an argument. Who was going to be boss? And then they had a war. And instead of killing each other and shooting each other's men, no, they blew up the towns, the cities, and the general public, who basically created the political will for democracy. So they said, well, we'll just kill them. And that is Sudan right now. And it's being basically, the Wagner forces are there, ISIS is there, which is the CIA's version of the Wagner forces. It's pretty nuts, right?
And it's ruthlessly extractive now. And you can't help but recognize that keeping things this way simply must not only be important to the West, but literally it must be the most important thing to the West. It's so important to them that they have always maintained this status quo no matter what else changes in the world. Wallahi, they're dedicated to the subjugation and the exploitation of Africa more than they're dedicated to anything else. Everything else is allowed to change except for this. This must never change.
I wonder why.
And it's not difficult to see why.
Why?
It's the subjugation and the exploitation of Africa that has enabled the West to impersonate a superior civilization.
Oh, is that it?
It's like a con man, a drifter who tries to convince people that he's some sort of an aristocrat or a monarch or something.
Like our present
Well,
president.
he needs to have some kind of a display of a monarch's wealth in order to be convincing. And that's been the whole basis for what the West claims about itself being superior.
Oh, yeah.
The whole basis has always been
superior.
that they're materially successful.
Oh, yeah. I got money.
Today,
I got blame.
iPhones and technology. You have a high standard of living.
Look at these glasses.
So that means that you must be better.
I'm
you
better.
must be more intelligent. You must be more evolved. You
I'm
must
all
be
the
more
above.
civilized, more advanced than the rest of us.
I got more degrees
look how
than
nice
some
their
others.
places are. See how much better their stuff is. Well, this is all reliant upon the vicious pillage and plunder of Africa.
Yeah, baby.
Without this subjugation, without this exploitation of Africa, Europe and the West would be nothing but crude, emaciated serfs, barely producing enough to survive.
They still are.
Their wealth was primarily derived from theft and plunder.
Yeah, baby.
From piracy and slavery, from mass murder and crime.
That's our white
It's just
race.
a historical reality.
Yeah.
Because of the subjugation of Africa, first through chattel slavery, the extraction of Africa's human resources, and now through the extraction of natural resources, the West has been able to maintain this artificial, unearned status as a so-called civilization, keeping Africa subordinate.
And you look at art, music, films, again, the essence of all of those things come from Africa. Music, we just listened to Gil there. He's as African as you get, but, through New York, Tennessee, and D.C., this guy, I love
that
this guy.
suppressed and impoverished is an existential need for the West. It's the only way that they can keep up the pretense of their supremacy.
Yes, killing
Because
black
again,
people.
The pretense of their supremacy has never been based upon any actual advancement, any actual sophistication,
Yep.
any actual moral or intellectual development. It has always been based on the violent accumulation of wealth and resources, upon brute power, deceit, and conniving. And Africa, the subjugation of Africa, is the most vital necessity for keeping this con going.
Yeah, baby.
I mean, right now, the trade relationship between the West and Africa is that something like 70% of exports to Africa from the West are manufactured goods, and imports from Africa are just the raw materials used to make those manufactured goods. So they're taking from Africa what is needed in order to produce goods that then Africa buys from the West, made with their own raw materials. And the West has done everything possible to try to impede Africa's ability to build its own manufacturing base so that they could potentially use their own raw materials, use their own raw minerals to produce their own goods. I mean, the whole process should be done in-house. It should all be done in Africa. That's what makes sense. You know, you have the materials, you have the minerals, you can make the products. That's how it should be. Rather than giving your raw natural resources to the West, for them to manufacture and refine and process and so on, Africa could do all of those things themselves. I mean, imagine the impact that would have.
Ooh, baby.
Where would that leave the West then?
Oh, we would be
Well, they know
dancing
that.
serfs.
The West knows that. They're acutely aware of their actual total dependence upon Africa. If Africa manufactured, if they used their own resources, their own minerals, their own materials for their own industries, well, the entire economy of the West would collapse. And with the collapse of their economy, their whole so-called civilization would collapse. Africa is the foundation upon which they built their house. So they know this. And like I said, this is why no matter what else changes in the world, no matter how power dynamics shift in the world, the subjugation of Africa has been maintained for over 800 years. There's literally nothing more important to them than this. And this is why there are very powerful factions in the West that want to destroy BRICS, and why they fearmonger about Chinese investment in Africa, and why America specifically is engaged in non-stop interference, covert operations, regime change, regime infiltration projects all across the continent. I mean, look at South Africa, the ANC, either out of naivete or corruption, or naivete that devolved into corruption, or out of coercion, or some combination of all of these factors, the ANC collaborated with neoliberal programs for 30 years. I mean, to one degree or another, for the last 30 years. But as global power dynamics have been shifting, and the creation and the ascendancy of BRICS has been taking place, people have started to have aspirations. And more importantly, they've started to have options. And those options have made their aspirations actually achievable. I'm talking about aspirations of political independence, aspirations of economic sovereignty, aspirations of getting out from under the yoke of the West. That's actually becoming achievable now. So the ANC was facing, and they are facing, severe criticism and opposition. They were being challenged. And they were being challenged by parties that do not accept neoliberalism, neoliberal colonialism, corporate colonization. And the U.S. knew that eventually they were going to lose power. Eventually, the ANC was going to face the consequences of capitulation and collaboration, and they were going to be removed and replaced. And if the U.S. didn't do something, then the replacement for the ANC was not going to be an obedient client. Because again, South Africa has the option now not to be an obedient client of the West. I mean, as long as there were no options, then it wasn't that risky for America. Even if the ANC lost popularity, no matter who replaced them, they would have no choice but to capitulate to neoliberalism because there was no options. But there are options now. So you have the United States then backing the so-called Democratic Alliance, the DA, which is an overtly neoliberal, Western-aligned, elitist political party of colonizer collaborators. So the unpopularity and the opposition to the ANC opened a space for the DA to move into the government in the last election. So now you have this so-called GNU, the Government of National Unity, which is nothing but a neoliberalism light and a neoliberalism hardcore. It's a coalition of one party that was aligned with the West, the ANC, aligned with the West out of coercion or naivete or corruption, but which could have potentially been influenced by anti-neoliberal populist sentiment if given a chance. Now they've joined together with a party that is intensely committed to colonization, intensely committed to neoliberalism. And they want to privatize everything. They want everything to be sold off to the private sector. They want to hollow out the government completely. And you need this radical neoliberal colonizer faction to be there, because as the new options have emerged, you've now had radical anti-neoliberal positions being advocated and becoming viable. I mean, you're actually having calls for the nationalization of industries rather than the privatization of state enterprises. Well, the West can't have that. So they need something like the DA, the Democratic Alliance, to move in to try to avert the threat of South Africa actually becoming politically independent and economically sovereign. You know, they call it the GNU, but the N shouldn't stand for national. It's the government of neoliberal unity. It's a coalition united against the people of South Africa, in my opinion, in service to the interests of the elite private sector of South Africa and to the global Western private sector. The DA is a racist, Zionist, anti-BRICS, pro-Western colonizer political party, funded at least in part by the National Endowment for Democracy in the United States, which is nothing but whose sole mission is to advance American interests. So in South Africa, this was a regime infiltration project that was undertaken to actually avert regime change in South Africa, organic regime change. Because look, you can nationalize the mining sector in South Africa. You can. You can nationalize the banking sector. You can nationalize the Reserve Bank.
Okay, you get the picture. Let's see what our friend here, David, look up Alfred Lambermont. Okay, I'll give it a shot. Alfred Lambermont. There we go. Lambermont, Alfred Weber's contributions to the development of Google Books. Oh, that's interesting. Contribute to the development of a positive future for the Earth and our living community in a dimensional ecology have included Google Books. Okay, I like this. Born 1942, age 83. He's about 8 years older than me. Here's other books he wrote. He's written a bunch of books. My Journey, let's see, Emergency of the Age of Cataclysm. Let's see, Age of Cataclysm. Age of Cataclysm, Philip H. Liss, Search for the Age of Cataclysm. Age of Cataclysm, original published in 1974. Age of Cataclysm, Albert Weber, Philip H. Book, details, print length 303 pages, language English, published. Returns only $10. Recently reviewed. Age of Cataclysm. Philip, what's his name? Okay, I looked that up. I got it there. I'll go back and let's see the other one. Negative entertainment of humanity, information of chronography. Let's see, using the travel technology to manipulate human timelines. Ooh, I like that. Let's try that one. Using travel technology to manipulate human timelines. Discussion and forums. Humans will never develop time travel. How would time travel affect life as we know it? Oh, we could have time travel, and I actually think we kind of do have time travel. It's just that we don't experience it. I mean, we just think it's our life, right? But we go on to the next moment, we're traveling through time, right? And every time we do that, we go, especially if we go into the moment with without any expectations, but are there in our present state of conscious intent to do our best, then you got something going. And I think that's time travel myself. David, have you experienced any time travel? What's your draw and interest to time travel? Let's see. Rhonda, haven't seen you in a while. This is time travel, but it's not what you think. It's lame. do. Yep. It's lame if you're living it. Like right now, all the crap we're dealing with, it's lame. But if you were in the audience on the other side of the fourth wall, observing it, you would think this stuff was. That's why it's a soap opera, right? Because that's what it really is. It's nothing more than a soap opera. Donnie is no more than a game show host, right? And all the billionaire bros, they're just contestants in a reality show, right? And all of their money is just make believe, It's anyway. I almost feel like I want to take a nap. It's a part of the super soldier. Really? Causal. Oh, tell us, David. Let's. With who's super soldier? Because there were a lot of people. There was those guys in the SEAL Corporation having super soldiers, and there were others. Just like in Marvel comics and James Bond novels, there's always a number of evil villain enterprises, not just one. With Spectre and Smirch and, a few others, right? Ooh, yeah. That's 4 of you, and there's 4 thumbs up, and thank you very much. Let's see, keep going. The corporation is named Kruger. Okay. A corporation named Kruger, Kruger. Kruger is a family-owned company that makes paper tissues and other products. The company has founded in 1904 by Joseph Kruger. Yep, spelled just the same way. Montreal, Canada. Kruger Inc., Canada, private company which manufactures public paper. Okay. Super soldiers made by the Kruger Corporation. Hans Kruger, Marvel Cinematic universe. Oh, okay. Heinz Kruger was a Hydra agent who infiltrated the United States Department of State during World War II, posing as. People also ask, what is the U.S. making super soldiers? What was the super soldier program called? What happened to all the super soldiers? Who invented the super soldiers? Okay, right, these are all good things. What is U.S. making? What is the super? We're going to go backwards. Who invented super soldiers? Serum. No. What happened to all the super soldiers? Yeah, that's a good one. Howard Zimmo executed all the Winter Soldiers by shooting them each in the head, as his true intention was to lure the Avengers to Hydra Siberia facility and force them to fight with each other. Okay. So the future senior military leaders and defense officials will strive to develop what might be called super soldiers. In other words, developing the enhancing critical skills, physical and cognitive abilities, and social, cultural, and ethical understandings of the environment in which the soldiers operate. There is no ethical anything, right? Let's see. Duncan was a super soldier in the Vietnam era. Could have been, because I met him in the 80s, right? So, and he still looked like he was 16. You know, Albie looked like he was an old man, and Duncan, who was older, yes. So, David, did you ever meet Dirk Dorge and the princess in New York? They hung out at the Theosophical Society. They hung out at the UN. Who else? And they were also. Oh, David, did you ever hang out down in the Battery and where the big fan is for the tunnel that goes to Brooklyn from the Battery? And that's where the entrance to the Men in Black installation in New York is. And if you sit around in the park there at the Battery and, you know, look somewhat Montauk. Montauk is, well, you know why Montauk? Montauk was part of the Manhattan Project because Nikola Tesla had turned, you know, he came back from Colorado Springs after finding all that stuff in the caves in Colorado of ancient societies of high technology, you know, the reptile kids. And, you know, the people like J.P. Morgan bankrolled it. And that's why pretty much all of Eastern Long Island is honeycombed with very strange things like Montauk. And many people have made, you know, documentary things about it. You know, Preston wrote his novel. But all of that is anything that gets out there in the community, you know, via the public media. Even me, is put out there or allowed to be put out there to be used as disinformation of sorts. You know. Now I'm, you know, doing my best to just be the little pebble in the World Wide Web as a shamanic vibration, and yeah, I'm doing my thing. That's why I'm doing it. You know. And sure, not making any money, but I am finding really good friends. And David, if you want to get a hold of me at the Dude Awake 42 at Gmail, that's my email. The Dude Awake 42 at Gmail. I will send, and you have, if you have Google, I will Google you a number of my novels and stories and essays and things of that nature. And you know, and as you read it, you'll probably say, "Boy, this is deep," right? Duncan. Cameron, yep. Ed, yep. Bellick, yep. Exactly, yep. All those guys, yep. It was fun, like I said, I hung out with them for a good 2 or 3 years, and things just got too weird, too close, and I didn't want to, go to the other side. So, and I had other places to go, So I went back into my artist persona, my scholarly persona, my community organizer persona, and they were always very good at cleansing the darkness, right? So, and that's kind of you got to be able to tap dance over the stones. That's how Jesus got to walk across water. I mean, he was just walking along, and there were stones there, right? Now the guys over there saw him walking across water, but he was stone. The stones were about that far underneath the water, so it looked like he was walking on the water. Then he hits on a certain place, and a big turtle came, and he stepped on it and walked him. Now, what's the difference between the miracle of walking on water and walking on the stones and then a turtle, right? It's all relative, right? And who your relatives are. Bill Schneider, yeah. Whatever happened to that guy? Didn't he have a radio show? Anyway, when I was a kid, late night radio was really William B. William, Gene Shepard, let's see, Big Wilson, and two other guys. Their names, and they all had guys who, had been on flying saucers and you name it, and ooh. So ask some questions, tell some stories, and I'll relate. I'm going to go. Let's see. I'm going to put this guy on here.
You can do all of these things and everyone knows it. It's not some kind of a mystery that these types of measures would be immensely empowering for South Africa. These aren't measures that we don't know whether they're useful and beneficial or not. Obviously they are, and tremendously so. And that's precisely why these types of policies, these types of measures have to be subverted. I mean, it's absolutely ludicrous for anyone in South Africa today to advocate neoliberal policies when we have in front of our eyes the catastrophic failure of those policies. I mean, nearly half the population is unemployed, over half the population among the youth. 75% of South Africans earn just the equivalent of $350 a month or less. In fact, roughly half of the population earn only $75 a month.
No, 400.
And you're still going to advocate for the policies that got you here? No, obviously, if you nationalize, it's better for you. Obviously, I mean, empower the government with those abundant resources instead of letting foreign companies seize those profits and transfer them out of the country. I mean, if those revenues are going to the state, then the government will have the resources they need to better address the needs of the society. They can invest in SMEs, they can provide education, skills training, and so on, fund R&D. I mean, it's a no-brainer, but you're scared of what the West will do. They tell you that if you nationalize, then there will be massive capital flight, investors will run away, and so on. Well, think about that for a second. They're trying to scare you with consequences that they themselves will be imposing. They're warning you that if you do something that is in your country's best interest, they will punish you. This is very different from telling you that the policy in and of itself is actually bad. They're telling you that they will make it a bad policy because of what they will do to you if you implement it. You understand? These people are threatening you, and then you're supposed to trust their advice? The advice of these neoliberal predators? You're supposed to listen to them and trust their advice when they are blatantly telling you that they will punish you if you do something to try to make things better, to try to change things? I mean, They couldn't make it more obvious. Their malice.
Doing right now.
They couldn't make their malice more obvious. They couldn't make it any more obvious how against your best interests they are. How much they put their own private interests above the interests of their country. They're openly identifying themselves to you as your enemy. You understand me? I mean, they're not saying that nationalization doesn't work. They're not saying that it isn't beneficial. They're saying that they will do everything in their power to make sure it doesn't work. They're saying that they will sabotage nationalization for their own sake, for the sake of their own profit interests. And still you let this type of people have a say in policy discourse? Well, that's humiliating. They hold you in contempt and they don't even hide it. I'm telling you, everyone knows what should be done in a country like South Africa, what kind of economic policies they should implement. And it's the same thing that many global South countries should do. Everyone knows the obvious economic benefits of these types of policies. And everyone knows that the only reason that you don't implement these policies is because parasitic, predatory, Western colonizing private sector powers will try to punish you if you do. I mean, for instance, the nationalization of key sectors in South Africa or in any other country, such as mining, such as energy and finance. This is essential to try to break the stranglehold of foreign capital on your country and to ensure that the country's resources are actually used for the benefit of the people and for the benefit of the domestic economy. Land reform, the question of land reform in South Africa is critical. This is a critical issue. There should be a comprehensive land reform program in South Africa that prioritizes the redistribution of land to the historically disadvantaged. This is basic and it's incredibly obvious. And once you've boosted the state's resources through nationalization, there should be a comprehensive social welfare system that provides for the basic needs of all citizens, including healthcare, education, and housing. This is, again, obvious. And finally, the government, of course, needs to pursue a policy of industrialization.
And that's exactly what Mr. Libya did, right? Muammar Gaddafi, right? He went in there, and he was a CIA clown, but they just wanted him to do one thing, and he did with the oil, and he took the revenue that they were giving him, and instead of him, making castles like Saddam did, and like the Shah did, he put it back into the population. And because Libyan oil was so pure, well, Libyan crude, it didn't need the kind of finishing that rougher oils do. So he was able to take his percentage of not just the profit, but the oil, and turn it into products that he sold, just like this young man is talking about. Instead of just letting the Europeans take the resources and then selling you back products, Muammar was taking those resources and making products there. Another thing that went on was that when Libya first started getting its wells drilled, there were a great deal of Libyans who were smart enough, educated enough to work for the oil companies to do the stuff, right? And not just have Europeans do it, and they have no idea what was going on, which is kind of what's went on in Russia. That's why Russia has a hard time with its oil industry at this moment, because the Koch brothers went in there in the 90s and spunked up the Russian oil industry and its refineries and its wells and its pipelines, and had their own people not only put the stuff in, but it kept it running. So when this thing happened, they left. The Russians have to take care of it because they can't. Anyway, Libya, Muammar, he basically eased his way into taking over, and he made it profitable for the Europeans to let him do it. Plus, he also wore funny uniforms and was kind of a clown. And did assuage. That's how stupid the Europeans were. They thought he was that clown. He was their clown, but he wasn't. Right? But his people knew what he was doing because he gave everyone in Libya education, housing, food, a job. Then he took his technology of drilling wells and went deep past the oil to the firmament and brought up water and turned all Libya into the Garden of Eden. And in the 80s, 90s, and early O's, Libya made more money selling vegetables to the EU than they did oil. And that's why Hillary Clinton became, we saw we killed them. The first thing they went after was the water. Then the infrastructure of the community. They didn't touch the oil. Blew up the cities, blew up the hospitals and schools. NATO did. Shock and awe. As this man says, it's all pretty obvious. Well, David, you know, all of the comic book realities, I mean, people don't understand that the stuff that's in the Marvel comics, hey, that's actually, you know, Hell Hydra really is, right? There are, you know, reptile people living underground. There are aliens all over the place and have been before we even got here. We're somebody's science experiment. Well, but the interesting thing is, almost none of that stuff really matters because for it to really affect you in a negative way, you have to let it, oh my God, I'm so scared. Oh, but if you are there with love's co-creation, the intent to serve love's co-creation, right? None of this stuff matters. It's more tinsel on the tree, right? Right, application magic, right? And so magic is just somebody else's science. Right? The thing about any kind of technology, it's like God said, no idolatry. Right? And that's what's happened to America. We have turned our materialism into our God. You know, on the front steps of the New York City stock market, they have the golden bull. You know, when I was a kid, on the steps of the New York stock market was George Washington. Because the first American president was sworn in on the steps of the New York City, you know, New York stock market. Not the same building, those same steps that are there right now. And that says it all right there. Pearl Street runs straight into Wall Street. On Wall Street, one end of Wall Street is west, and the other is Broadway. It's a little street, but there are these, you know, 20s, in the 20s, they built, you know, 20, 30, 40-story skyscrapers down there, so it's like a canyon, right? And the only sun comes in because of Pearl Street goes straight up to the steps of New York. So all of Lower Manhattan is just kind of like DC, laid out in a satanic Sitchin. Right? Sitchin is those, you know, Doctor Strange, those little shields that are lightning bolts and make patterns. Those are magic amulets. Those are spells. In language, it's a spell. Oh, that's why it has spelling, right? Because it's a spell. And we are clones, Like I said, we're somebody's science fair project. Now our soul, that's not, that's a whole nother dimension. So this thing is just an avatar, This is just so we can play in the sandbox. That's why all the stuff you're talking about, David, is almost irrelevant when you are talking about spirituality. So why the Hebrew nation is important? Because within the construct of the Old Testament and the Bible, meaning the Old Testament is the Torah, but in the Hebrew dynamic is the Torah, the Talmud, and the Kabbalah. Right? Torah is the everyday. It's for everybody to read, right? And the Torah, translated into Greek, means you suck. You read the Old Testament, it goes on and on. All it does is go on and on and on. How about the children of Adam and Eve just suck? They just, spoiled little brats, right? And we still are. Just look at what we do running around on this planet right now. We're spoiled little brats. We don't understand about servant love's procreation. Kabbalah talks about that. So Kabbalah is esoteric, hidden knowledge. Kabbalah is a cult, which is exactly what you're talking about. Application magic. That's a Kabbalah. So in every religion, they have a similar motif, right? The Catholics do. I mean, even the Protestants and the Baptists. They would like scream at you that no. Right? I was at the doctor's. My doctor is such a schmutz. His nurses can't stand. He goes through nurses like I go through bottles of water, and so he has and they all come out of the nursing school / nurse practitioner. So they're getting their chops in by being this guy's assistant, and at a certain point they can't take it anymore. And I mean, some of them don't last a month, right? So this new one, she's a new one. I go see that guy every 3 months, and I go to the clinic maybe once or twice a month to get my blood pressure, my oxygen, and my temperature, and my weight. They have all the right tools. And they have the nice little thing you put on your finger without puncturing it. It tells your blood sugar and all the rest. Anyway, so she, takes first the girl, oh, we have to do this thing again. I said, I can't read it. So, then she asked me about how often I masturbate, how long it takes me to come. It was great. Because I've taken that thing a zillion times. I know it's on it. So, and she is like Nurse Ratched. And every time, because, you do it. I said, I can't see, by, HEPA law, you have to help me fill this out. And she's, so anyway. And I laugh and I tell jokes, and at a certain point, she stops being a Nurse Ratched and becomes a human being and starts laughing too. And then, so the whole time we were going through this process, and same with the doctor. When I was there, I was wearing this, and when the new nurse was there, I was like this. And I'm not seeing myself look like this. So I'm talking to the nurse like I'm a doctor. I'm telling her about all the things that's going on in my body, da da da. And I'm seeing her look at me, and she's like, and then, and so you can't see my eyes. It's really dark, but I can see everything and everybody, right? So I noticed that this girl, and she's black, and her arms and her body is covered in tattoos, right? Now she's wearing a uniform, and her sleeves goes down, to about there, right? But it's a little loose, so I can see up her arms, and they are really intricate. Her body is covered in stitches, and so I said to her, "So you got a lot of ink?" And she looks at me, and I said, "You got to watch out, or you're going to turn into the illustrated girl." And she goes, "What?" I said, "Yeah, there's a guy named Brad Bradbury. He wrote a story called Illustrated Man. You should read it." And that's, I have one tattoo. I put it way back here so I can't see it, so I don't get. Because if you get it on your arms or any place, and it's a kind of addiction. You just start covering your body, and that's what this girl did. I mean, her chest is covered. I mean, but she's wearing a uniform, but it was open. You could see she had tattoos on her chest, and I mean, so anyway, we're talking and talking and talking and talking about what kind of music she likes, and she's like, I'm a black white guy. She's a white black girl, right? So anyway, so she really wants to be mainstream. She wants to be a nurse practitioner and drive around in her Audi and have a nice little apartment and get furniture from IKEA. But she doesn't realize that in the next 2 weeks, everything's going to crash to the ground and electricity won't exist anymore. That's why I'm doing these long shows, I'm telling you guys, you better start sticking these shows on thumb drives or DVDs. Anyway, somewhere that you can bring it back, because electricity will come back relatively. I mean, it will seem like it's gone forever. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced a hurricane where you lose electricity for 2 weeks to a month or two. It seems like forever, right? So, me, I'm an electrician. I always have a backup, and then a backup for that backup, and a backup for that, always kind of prepared. And most people aren't. So this girl, so most everyone in this hospital, I read all their palms. All the girls know me. Sometimes, and I've told them pretty deep stuff. Boy, that's deep. So a lot of them go, "Can I talk to you after?" I'm like, sure. And so, so this girl, basically, I said, "Oh, let me look at your palm." And I said, "Put your palm up, right?" And then she said, "No, I don't do that." I said, "What are you talking about? You're covered in tattoos." I said, "What are you talking about? You're covered in ink." And she goes, "What are you?" I said, "You got tattoos all over you, and they're all stitchings." She goes, "What?" I said, "Yeah, they are, ceremony, energy, magic." And she was like, "No, I'm a good Baptist girl." I said, "Well, there's 68,000 Baptist sects just in America, just in the Southern Baptists, and they're all cults. You're a cult girl." I just kept going deeper and deeper and deeper, and she got out of there as fast as she could. You know what I mean? You know what I mean, man? That's deep. To switch the glass to see what you guys are saying here. Let's see. I've been talking about application magic. Yes, like I said, magic is just another man's science. It's somebody else's religion, because that's cabal, right? It's part of religion, but no, it's you read in Exodus, right, all about how they moved the temple and the covenant, the Ark of the Covenant, And it has to be so many cubics big and da 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 da, right? And this room and that room, and have a kitchen and blah blah blah, TV room, all the rest for God. So that's the bottom line is that you have to be able to see. You have to be able to see past your death, right? You have to be able to see yourself as spirit, right? Because that's who and what you are all the time, spirit. You're not your body, right? You're not the physical world. You're not anything that you see on YouTube or reading a book or any of the above, or listen on the radio or any of the above. All that is an opportunity to navigate your avatar through the sandbox. So your spirit consciousness can learn a few things, right? So that's what it's about. Let's see. So we've dropped down. It's an hour and 6. You know what? Let's see what time it is. What time is it? Oh, it's about 4:30. I'm gonna go do a few things so everybody can go make dinner or make a cup of tea or something like that. I'll be back within 40 minutes or so, right? And we'll go from here. So I want you to think of, go look at it, go to my channel, Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob. Go look at see if last night's show is up. That was a long one. It was like 6 hours. I just kept talking and talking and talking. Oh, that's deep. Look, I'm live. Look me. That's me. Me live. It says I'm live. Your videos. Down and Dirty. Yep, that was last night. 49 people watched, 5 thumbs up. Nobody made any comments. Why didn't that thing go? They blocked that show. Can you believe it? They blocked that show. I guess I said too many things that got too many other people upset. Well, that's life. Well, the more they do that, the more I will, it brings me closer to the surface of the public. So those 49 people were lucky to have been part of the show. And so I hope all of you guys enjoy the show, and I'll be back. Right? I'll be back and go watch some other shows and get some ideas, and let's really start having a good conversation. That was one of the things about last night's show. We had a really good conversation. We had a lot of people make some great comments, just like here. David, you've been making some good ones. So anybody wants to get a hold of me, dudeawake42@gmail.com. Okay.